Hi, this is Chapter 1 of Real Estate, Finance, and Investment. This is an introduction to real estate investments, and the first topic is legal concepts. The chapter objectives here are to define property rights and estates, define the types of deeds and titles, define the methods of title insurance, and make sure we understand the purpose of a note and a mortgage. In this chapter, it is very important that we understand the difference and the definition of many terms. The first one we're going to talk about is property rights and estates. So there's a difference between what we say is real estate and real property. The real estate refers to the physical land and improvements that are constructed on that land, so things that are permanently attached. While real property refers to the ownership rights associated with the real estate. And there could be many parties that have different ownership rights for a given parcel of land. And we'll give some examples in a second. Some examples of what property rights would include are the right to possess, use, enjoy, and dispose. So I'd say, well, what's the difference here? You'd say, for example, the right, you might own a piece of property but not have the right to use it because you have leased it to someone else. The legal term, quiet enjoyment, is mainly, for example, that your neighbor can't play loud music all night, keep his dog out barking all night, and so forth. And disposal is the right to sell it. Continuing with the terms we need to know, interest is a broad legal term used to denote a property right, the right to possess, use, or dispose of property. So often it's not only the owner that has rights. So, for example, the leasee. So it's important that we understand these terms too. Leasee, mortgagee, we'll see grantee, grantor too. The leasee is the person who leases the land and has the right for the exclusive use of that land for whatever period of time the lease is over. A mortgagee is the lender. And they have a secured interest. So that says it gives them the right to repossess or take the property back if the property owner, the borrower, defaults. So they have rights too. It's important that we understand all of these rights and how they may be restricted if we transfer property to someone else, because there's potential conflicts. So for example, if you are looking to purchase a property and you don't know that there's a tenant in the property that has a lease and that the owner has defaulted, that would surely change your view of the property. That once you owned it, you found out you couldn't move in because it's a tenant there, and now you have a mortgage that you are now responsible for. So understanding all the rights associated with the property can be very important. Estate is a term used to denote possessory interest, the right to occupy or use the property. And potentially possessory would be if you could use it at the end of the lease. Okay? Not all interest in real estate is possessory, okay, or estate. For example, easements, the right to use land owned or leased by someone else for a special purpose, or right of way. So you might be able to have a right of way that you can pass through something. That wouldn't be a possessory, that's just a right to walk through. Or an easement that you could I have an easement in my house that there's a pipe that goes through that brings the water from the center island back into the woods. So it's between our two properties, there's a slight easement. Or there could be, again, interest of a lender, like a lien. So if you didn't pay a property tax, and put a lien on the property. So they don't have the right to own it, to take possession of it, but they do have the right, if property transfers, to look for a sum of money from this property. It would be a lien. We'll see that we classify estates in a few different ways. One we've just looked at, classifying an estate in possession versus a estate not in possession, but would be in possession in the future. Okay. There are two types of estates in possession: a freehold estate and a non-freehold or lease estate. So a freehold estate is when the property is owned by the estate holder and there's no certain date on which the estate ends, versus a non-freehold or a leasehold estate, which gives you the right to possess the property owned by another, but just for a certain amount of time. The major types of this freehold estate are fee simple absolute, also referred to as fee simple absolute, life estates, and then we have the future life estates of reversion and remainder. Let's look at each of these in more depth. Again, a fee simple estate is the most complete form of ownership. So you can divide, sell, lease, borrow against, and the only thing that you'd be subject to are the laws of the state or deed restrictions. So if you say you could divide it, but if that area of land is zoned to only be 1 acre and you have 1 acre, you couldn't divide it and sell pieces of it off. But if you had 2 acres and it was zoned for 1 acre, then you could divide it off and sell. If it was zoned for non-business, you could not turn it into a business. So you could divide it and sell it and lease it and borrow it within the limits of the laws of the state and deed restrictions. A life estate is a freehold estate that lasts as long as the life of the named person. So oftentimes this is when someone wants to give their property away as a gift while they're still alive, but then remain living on the property until their death. So they could be the named person, and then it would go to whoever they left to upon their death. There are 2 other types of estates associated with the life estate, and they're the future life estates. So they're not in possession now, but in the future. They're the reversion, where the holder of the estate in land, or the grantor, conveys to another person, the grantee, a present estate, but retains the right to take it back in the future. Or the remainder, which would be the future estate, for a third person given by the grantor once the grantee's estate is terminated. That is the easiest way to explain this would be with an example. So for example, if someone said that they were going to give the estate to Sarah for her life, okay, well then Sarah would get the estate for the rest of her life. And then at the point that Sarah died, there would be a reversion interest. It would go back to the original person that gave it to her, or that person's heirs, that grantor. So that would be a reversion issue. If, however, it said for Sarah for the rest of her life, and then to Robert, well, Robert would have the remainder interest, because it is now saying who it would go to at the end of Sarah's life. So Sarah would have it at the end of her life. It would go to Robert, and he would get the remainder. He would have the remainder interest. So these are 2 types of estates, future estates that would come with a life estate. Examples of leasehold estates are estate for a number of years. So there would be a specific exact duration. I could rent it for 1 year, for 3 years, whatever it may be. Or an estate from year to year that would say at the end of every year we will revisit it. You could have a month to month. You could have what's called a tenant will, where they just need to give you 30 days notice. So these are all different types of leasehold estates. Moving into the area of title. Title is a document proving ownership. It establishes the quality of rights, quantity and quality of rights in real estate being conveyed from the seller to the buyer. The title exists for freehold estates only. The leasehold estate, that's created by a contract, a lease, between the person who holds the title, the leaseor, and the leasee, the person renting the property. Here's a slide that just kind of summarizes all the different estates in land and property. Again, you'd have either a freehold or a leasehold, where there's a limit to the amount of time, and it comes to an end. A leasehold, or there is no ending time to freehold. And the freehold could be a present interest, where you currently own it, or a future interest, which would be the reversion or the remainder. And the types of present interests are the inheritable estates, so something that's a fee simple, or the non-inheritable estates, which is a life estate. So you have it for the rest of your life, and then it either reverts back to the original grantor, or it goes the remainder, has a remainder interest. As far as going back to titles, say, what about title insurance? That is a means by which a buyer of real estate could learn in advance whether or not sellers have and can convey the quality of title they claim to possess, and receive compensation if the title, after it transfers, turns out not to be represented as it was. There are three methods to do this. One is a covenant in deeds. This is simply the assurance of the seller in the deed. An abstract and opinion of the lawyer. So now you would have more than just the seller giving you his assurance. You'd now have a lawyer that looked it over and says, as far as they can tell from looking it over, that the title is clean. And then the third method would be title insurance. In this case, you'd have the abstract, the opinion of the lawyer, plus insurance. And you'd get this for both the owner and the lender. So if you're borrowing money, the lender generally on the mortgage will generally require this, and you also might decide to get it for yourself in most cases too. And that would be the safest way to do it, to get the title insurance. The abstract of the title is simply the historical summary of the publicly recorded documents that affects the title. So it just gives a summary of all the recorded documents. The deed is the means by which the title is transferred from one person to the other, the grantor to the grantee. So the owner is the grantor, is selling it to the next owner, the grantee. There are three types of deeds. A general warrant deed, where the grantor warrants that the title to the property is free and clear of all encumbrances except those that are listed. Special warranty deed, which has the same general, except that it limits the encumbrances to the time that the grantor held the property. So saying, well, while I own this property, I know it's free and clear, but they're not guaranteeing anything prior to that person owning it. So previous owners, they're not guaranteeing that the title is clean from anything that they did. And finally, you have the quit claim degree, which simply conveys to the grantee whatever rights, interests, and title that grantor may have. Anything that I know I have, any claims I have, I'll give to you. That's all that's saying at all. So which type of deed offers the most protection? That would be the general warranty deed. It offers the most comprehensive warranties about the title. And comes an interesting question. Would it be legal for you to give a quit claim deed for the Statue of Liberty to your friend? And in fact, yes, it would, because all a quit claim deed says is that simply the grantor quits whatever claim he has on the property. So, which, well, maybe none at all. So he'd say, well, I will give you a quit claim deed on the Statue of Liberty because I will give up all claims I have on that property at all. Well, I didn't have any to begin with. So yes, it would be legal for me to do that. Recording acts. To establish and preserve a claim on an interest in real estate, the instrument creating that claim must be recorded. For example, a mortgage must be recorded. If the mortgage is not recorded, then there's no claim. Recording acts are publicly accessible systems for assessing and establishing claims and interest in real estate, so that someone could go down and see who has all the claims on the real estate. They're designed to protect innocent people from purchasing real estate already sold to someone else, or purchasing real estate that has mortgages already encumbered on it or liens on top of it. It also, in the order, it keeps it by date when you do recordings. It would give you the order of, say, mortgages, and the first mortgage would be the senior mortgage that's recorded. All mortgages put on after that one would be junior mortgages. Mechanics liens are interesting in the fact that what they are is give the unpaid contractor or workers, so if they've worked on the house and they didn't get paid, they can put a lien up on the house. But one interesting thing about mechanics liens are they have some time, usually 1 to 6 months, depending on the state, to be able to put the lien up. So if you purchase a piece of property that's, say, brand new, it may be that the contractor didn't pay all of the subcontractors, and they still have 1 to 6 months to go out and then put a lien on your property so that you would have to pay for that. So you want to make sure that everything's covered there. Or a piece of property that's just had a lot of work done on it, same kind of thing. Tax liens, if the previous owner did not pay their taxes, they could have put a lien on the property for the taxes not paid. And as we can see, there's many limitations on property. We have public limitations and restrictions that would say, for example, fair housing and environmental issues that you couldn't have. There has to be a certain amount of fair housing. There has to be environmentally, can't be doing anything on the property that's not safe for the environment. There's zoning and building ordinances to make sure the property is safe, to make sure that someone's not running a business if it's not business zoned. There's private restrictions that might come up. For example, I'm building a house in an area, and one of the first houses in this particular new development, and the real estate market is not booming right now, but it is written in the contract that all of the houses have to be of a certain size. So they can't be any smaller than 4 bedrooms and 3,500 square feet and so forth. That way you know that at least all the houses in that area where you are building and putting your money in as an investment will be of the same quality. It can go down to areas, other neighborhoods that will actually say it can only be a colonial, it can't be a cape or so forth, and that it will be the type of the house, and you can choose from only these 6 colors on the outside of the house, or restrictions on what may be in your yard. There cannot be horses, there cannot be chickens, things like that may be in there. There will be no parking on the road in certain neighborhoods. So those are restrictions that are put in more on a private area, but you have to agree. Very similar to condo type rules. And police power, that's rules and protections that would be there for the safety and health of the citizens. That almost comes into the being able to quiet enjoyment, the fact that you couldn't make noise in the middle of the night and so forth. So there are many limitations on properties. We've just gone over a few, but with this hopefully you'll become more aware that when you're looking to buy a property, you really need to understand all the different rights that people may have on the property. And hopefully this chapter has made that clear.